Coming up, get out the popcorn. There's a new Native movie to stream. And graduation season is here. We have some helpful tips for Native grads to make your big day a celebration of cultural pride. Plus, we're talking economic development with Chief Sustainability Officer Mark Podlasly. Those interviews, plus headlines on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
Amirawahopa. Thank you for joining us. I am Aaliyah Chavez. The Bureau of Land Management has released its plan to manage 13.3 million acres of public lands in central and northern Alaska. The Central Yukon Resource Management Plan proposes land expansion, fish and wildlife protection, and the development of recreational areas, among other things. The guide reflects public input collected over more than a decade and emphasizes co-stewardship collaborations with Alaska Native tribes, as well as incorporates Indigenous knowledge into its proposals. A record of decision for the plan will be issued later this year. We head now to Washington State, where the Puyallup tribe makes a big investment in a green energy solution for the world and for the economic security at home. Our Stuart Huntington has more.
5 years ago, the Puyallup tribe of Indians resolved to fight global warming and help create a carbon-neutral economy. Today, they're putting their money behind those words as lead investor in a company building utility-scale batteries to store power from green sources.
So first and foremost, it's about the environmental protection. It's about getting rid of fossil fuels. It's sustainable. So it checks that box. And then the second box, which is equally important, is there's a business case for it with the potential market in the billions. And then thirdly, it is fits with what we're able to do right now.
The tribe owns waterfront property in Tacoma and operates a shipping container modification company. Its new partner, Portland-based SkipTech, aims to make the batteries out of, well, shipping containers.
I am incredibly excited that we have the Puyallup tribe as our partners in doing this. They are well aligned with us in terms of our joint vision of what we want to do, of making equitable, reliable, and environmentally friendly sources of power.
The core so-called flow technology behind the batteries is decades old, but SkipTech thinks it has fixed a flaw.
Our specific flow battery that we're using was first developed in 1980. So our specific technology that we at Skip have developed is actually a replacement for a flaw that was at the heart of that battery.
The tribe agrees.
They have a product in development where they can essentially turn containers into liquid batteries to store energy. And definitely aligned with what we're trying to do, because it's one about the environment, it's sustainable, and it also has a serious business case for it.
The new partners hope to have a working prototype built by the end of the year. Stuart Huntington, ICT News.
A new facility in Seattle will house Native American adults experiencing chronic homelessness. The Sacred Medicine House will open 120 apartment units to single adults and adult couples without kids. Built by the Chief Seattle Club, a Native-led housing and human services agency, the goal is to end homelessness in urban King County, where Native Americans account for up to 15% of the homeless population. The housing site will staff a full-time cultural mental health worker, offer counseling services and recreational activities, as well as provide job assistance and other support programs. In Nevada, an endangered wildflower poses challenges for what could become the third lithium mine in the U.S. Violet Ridge holds one of the largest known lithium and boron deposits and will help accelerate key materials for electric vehicles. This mine threatens Team's buckwheat, a yellow and cream-colored flower. It made the endangered species list in 2022, citing mining as the biggest threat to its survival. The Center for Biological Diversity says the current plan could violate the Endangered Species Act and, if approved, would be challenged. Well, a rare cicada phenomenon is set to happen this spring. In parts of the Midwest and Southeast, a double dose of these singing insects, one brood on a 13-year cycle and the other on a 17-year cycle, will emerge from the ground. There will be an estimated 1 million insects per acre across 16 states. That's according to a cicada expert at the University of Connecticut. Often mistaken for locusts, cicadas are more noisy than they do harm. They are good for the soil, non-toxic, and don't bite. The occurrence will last about a month before their young crawl back into the ground until the next cycle. There's a new movie from Amarinda streaming now that is written, directed, produced, and casted by Osage filmmaker Diane Freyer. ICT's Shirley Snavy has this interview, but first, let's take a look at a clip.
I want to go away to school.
I'm proud of you, sis.
Why is it you always take the side of the women in this family?
Well, your sister got a degree.
What good did that do her? 2 busted up marriages? Scared away more men than the Vietnam draft.
She just knows what she wants.
Like me.
You're not going anywhere.
Why?
Because it's not safe.
I got to watch The Heart Stays, and it really did stay with my heart. It's a wonderful film. Tell me about it.
I think it comes with the idea for the story was something that I felt in my heart. I felt strongly that the most important things that we have in our community and we have there for us are our own traditional values. I saw a lot of people being absorbed by pop culture rather than traditional culture. Those kind of things are fun, and we all have to go out and have fun sometime. But I also wanted to honor the families and the young people that are struggling to identify with those traditional values, because that's really what my storytelling is all about, is the struggle for Native people to identify with traditional values within the context of modern society.
And you're an Osage living in New York, so you must experience that on a daily basis.
I do, but the wonderful thing is that my husband's also Osage Cherokee as well. We both are Osage with documented Cherokee heritage as well, and we go home for Osage dances every year and for the spring and fall peyote meetings, and sometimes just to go home. So we really have close ties to the community there that are a part of our life. I wanted something that emerged up out of community that was really reflective of us, and I knew that the key to unlock that opportunity was really us. It was the community, and that we had the resources with us. We didn't need approval from studios, and we didn't need people we needed one another, is what it comes down to. I say it proactively. And that if we would give each other support and be there, that we would come up with a story that we could all feel good about, that was really reflective of who we are and how we define ourselves.
Did I read that the music is all Native driven too?
Mm-hmm. I'm really excited about that too, that we've got an all Native soundtrack. The composer, Jarrett Tate, and a wonderful singer-songwriter from one of the Native communities in North Carolina, Brooke Simpson, who's been a starlet on The Voice. And we had Keith Secola, veteran Native rocker, Jimmy Wolf, a Mohawk Native person from northern upstate New York, a blues musician, And then Rex Lyons and the Ripcord. That's going to be the next level, is we're going to get out into music podcast and try to give a lot of support to the music in the film.
The Heart Stays is streaming now on a dozen platforms, including Amazon, cable and satellite stations, and YouTube. Shirley Snavy, ICT News.
When I think about the reservation and my life there as a kid, it's a time and a place that I really yearn for, because I spent that time with really formative people in my life, teaching me what it meant to be Navajo.
As Native Americans, substantial rights under the Constitution and laws of this country were going unenforced.
Those traumas show up in our elders throughout our lives, throughout our parents' lives.
A lot of the history is still impacting us to this day.
There's something really powerful that happens when you articulate an injustice. And at NARF, we do that on all fronts.
The Native American Rights Fund is the oldest and largest nonprofit law firm,
fighting alongside our tribal communities to defend Native American rights.
I see the difference that it makes with our Indian people.
We are facing really challenging times. The right to vote has been under siege.
Without voting, every other right in Indian country that matters falls.
So it's really important to have NARF standing with our tribal people to define voting as part of the fight for tribal sovereignty.
Anytime Native American voters are in a position to swing elections, that's when you see the most egregious violations of their voting rights.
And so we responded to that moment. The Native American Voting Rights Practice Group arose with this rising anti-democratic movement that has been happening across America.
The voting rights litigation that we do is tough. The facts are tough. They're very personal to our voting team, but our wins are big. And we win all the time.
We have to be vigilant in terms of protecting our rights, just like we have these last 53 years.
In order to make good on the promise of America, we have to make sure that every Native American can vote and have the ability to effectuate change in their communities. I think that's the way that we collectively move forward.
The Native vote matters because it's important, because it makes change in all the states we work in.
When our ballot box achieves justice for Native people, that's when we as a country can really feel faith in our institutions.
This election year, NARF will be leading the fight to protect Native American voting rights in states across the country. Follow along as we tell our stories from reservations, communities, and on the front lines of democracy. Now is the moment. Join us.
The spring season means students of all ages will soon walk across stages across America after completing long academic journeys. We have some tips for those Native American students wanting to show up on graduation day with their cultural identity on display. Whether it's walking across the stage for a high school, college, or even pre-K graduation, celebrations will soon kick off across the country. For Native students, graduation season is increasingly turning into a fashion show of sorts, with many using the moment to showcase their cultural identity by dressing traditionally, some wearing beaded graduation caps or eagle feathers. This season should be an exciting time for all involved, but that isn't always the case. The Native American Rights Fund says in recent years they've heard more and more stories where Native students were questioned for wearing regalia. Last year in Mississippi, Cheyenne River Sioux citizen Zuri Wilson wanted to wear an eagle feather on her high school graduation cap, but was told she couldn't because it was outside of her district's dress code. After an in-person visit to the school board and letters of support from prominent legal organizations, she won her fight, finally able to wear her cultural items proudly.
I think if anything in the school realm right now can feel contentious.
I spoke to NARF staff attorney Morgan Saunders to ask how to make graduation day run smooth. First, she says, is to decide exactly what you are interested in wearing. Then look into graduation-specific policies at your school. If you have any questions about it, reach out to a guidance counselor or advisor.
The earlier that you can get a clear answer on what is or isn't allowed at your school, the earlier you can take steps to address any concerns that you have and potentially, try to get an exception if an exception is needed.
Tribal leaders can play a role, too, by issuing public statements explaining the significance of their students dressing in regalia or by visiting a local school board meeting.
Also, providing, any relevant information, especially, if there is a state law on point, if the tribe, perhaps is giving out tribal honor cords or stoles or, gifting eagle feathers to students.
If you live in these 14 states, there are state laws already on the books protecting Native students from wearing regalia in some way. One of the states not on the list, New York, home to many tribal nations. College senior Yananui Logan says it won't stop her from representing her background when she graduates from Cornell University this spring. If anything, she tells me, she was more concerned about another important detail.
I actually inquired about my graduation regalia last June because I know a lot of designers, like either their orders fill up or they can't handle a lot. So I had asked a long time ago.
Logan mentioned, however, that things may be different for the class of 2024, a cohort that has already gotten the short end of the stick because their 2020 graduations were either outright canceled or moved virtually due to COVID.
We're really humble people, but we take our celebrations with a lot of pride, I find. And I think that you want to be proud, not just of what you accomplished in these academic spaces, but also what you accomplished as a Native person. And I think you can only really show that with a lot of times with your traditional regalia or your traditional wear.
And some more tips here. If you are a Native student who was denied from wearing traditional regalia at your graduation, experts encourage reaching out to your tribal nation or to the Native American Rights Fund for help. We'll be right back.
Growing up, I've always wanted to help people. I remember stories of my mom telling me, walking down the aisle at the grocery store and just asking people, how are you doing today? As a nurse, we're taught to lay hands, and that's so much healing. A lot of people don't get that loving touch. And as a nurse, going back to the reservation, I think, man, how much impact can you make just loving people right? I think for a long time, the Native American people have been fed this lie of you're dependent upon, say, the government. But I would love to create a culture where it's the Native American that says, I'm doing this so that I can make my community better. I'm doing this so that I could bring commerce into my community. I'm doing this so that I can have the resources to help others.
Next, we check in with an organization that brings expertise to First Nations as they evaluate big development opportunities. Mark Trahant sat down with Mark Podlasly to hear more about the First Nations Major Project Coalition's conference last week in Toronto. He is the coalition's Chief Sustainability Officer.
Welcome to the ICT Newscast, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Pleased to be here.
I want to ask you about First Nations Major Projects Coalition and what the whole conference is about.
The First Nations Major Projects Coalition is a 150 First Nations organization across Canada. Our members are all interested in acquiring equity positions in major projects proposed in their territories. The conference is a time for us to highlight the best examples and to introduce First Nations, Indigenous people to corporate partners and vice versa.
I think that's really interesting thing, particularly for a U.S. audience, is the idea that ownership means these projects can be done differently. Maybe elaborate a bit about that.
The First Nations and part of the coalition take the position that if you're going to be building a project in our traditional territories, we are going to host the project, whether it be a mine or power stations or transmission line, and we should derive some benefit from it. Not only on an economic sense, but we should be able to direct how they're built, how the environmental impact will happen, and more importantly, how they're shut down when they're completed.
And that might include, say, no-go project, right?
Self-determination includes the right to say no, and we do have that in Canada among First Nations.
I want to ask you about some of the projects that you think people really ought to know about.
Some of the big projects right now are in the clean energy transition. So anything in terms of power generation, power transmission, power distribution. So in Canada now, there's a precedent for nations or tribes to have 50% equity options in major transmission lines that are built across their lands. This is a game changer for a lot of nations who in the past have never been consulted, never mind invited to participate.
Well, just to be clear for viewers, because of the clean energy transition, we don't have enough capacity on the electric grid. And the idea that we have to expand it is part of the equation. So that means going to First Nations is really critical.
Yes, in Canada, because of First Nations, these lines will cross territories all over the land. There's no way that the provincial utilities, which is equivalent to our state, will be able to electrify the regions unless they have First Nations on board.
One of the things that's so exciting about your conference is the way people come together and not just show the really breadth of talent in Canada, whether it be at banks or other financial institutions with government lending programs and tribes and corporate sector. It's a real interesting combination of people.
We take the approach right now that we're not going to be able to get to net zero in the climate change transition without everybody at the table, First Nations, industry, and government. So what you see at the conference is everybody putting their best forward to try and come up with good solutions.
We've talked about this before, but there's such a stark difference between the U.S. and Canada. And part of that is just a different philosophy about how to engage with companies. Right now, so much of it here is either or, yes or, either or. And in Canada, it's much more nuanced. It's about if and when and why.
We still do have challenges. Some nations do not want development on lands. We are not pro-development at any cost. We as an organization support those nations who want smart development. So what we're trying to do at the moment is come up with good solutions that benefit the nation, will benefit Canada, and benefit consumers, but not at any cost.
And part of that means having the expertise to evaluate the projects. Maybe talk about that.
So the First Nations Major Projects Coalition started about 10 years ago when 16 nations or 16 tribes had the opportunity to acquire 30% equity stake in a natural gas pipeline, but lost it because they did not have the capacity to raise the funds for the investment or the technical expertise or governance skills to make that work. So what we are now is a collection of about 30 to 50 individuals, depending on the project, who will come in, assist the nation getting those technical skills so they can be at the table to negotiate a fair deal from the environmental side and the economic.
And that includes everything from economists to hydrology, geology, everything, right?
Energy specialists, mining engineers. We will be able to find the talent, generally Indigenous, and bring that to the table to help the nation make an informed decision.
One of the other things about your conference is striking is how international it is. And it's not just participants from the States, but also participants from New Zealand and other countries.
What we've found is that good examples in the Indigenous world can come from anywhere. So you're right, we've had Indigenous examples from Australia. Last year, we had an example of a 62 gigawatt green hydrogen production facility initiated by an Indigenous party, and when complete, will be the largest green hydrogen exporter into Japan. Astounding example. And you're right, in the United States, Navajo Power, a prime example of an ingenuity from a tribe here that we wanted to share with our members back home.
When people think about the transition to clean energy, often it's talked about in such a hurry. And I know that there's an urgency to do all this, but that also means you still have to go through the process on this.
Yes, we do not want to be in a situation of a new gold rush where there's people running over territories and bad decisions are made. No, there has to be some informed thought about this. But for us, we know that the only way that's going to happen is with informed decision-making, and that's what we provide at the Coalition.
How do you respond to people who think this is just another way of doing green colonialism?
I think the difference this time is that with us at the table and us as equity partners, we have a seat at the table. That's very different from before. And you're starting to see Indigenous people in Canada assume management positions, senior management positions. So these projects are not just simply being imposed on a nation.
I really got that at the conference. You had folks who are now taking senior leadership positions with the companies involved and helping design projects the way they should be.
Yes. So you're starting to see that accelerate in places. What's different this time is companies have realized that if they have an Indigenous partner in the project, you have an Indigenous co-investor, then you've gotten basically an Indigenous co-proponent. And co-proponents, by default, have given consent. What's coming up next? We're going to accelerate right now this in Canada. In Canada, the federal government has just announced a $5 billion loan guarantee program, which will give Indigenous people access to lower priced capital to make direct investments in these projects. That's what you're going to start to see really mushroom in the country.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Languages are among our most valued resources. Ensuring that they are preserved and taught is important in Indigenous communities and here at ICT. Today, we're continuing our Language Break segment, which features Native speakers from across Turtle Island sharing their beautiful and bold words and phrases. This week, we bring you the Hawaiian language from Kumukau'i Peralto and music from Kalani Pea.
Mai maka'u I kahana, maka'u I kamoloa. Mai maka'u I kahana, maka'u I kamoloa. Don't be lazy. Mai maka'u I kahana, maka'u I kamoloa. Don't fear work. Fear laziness.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit us at ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.